Hi, folks. Dr. P here, and I'm going to talk about the fact that probability is not certainty, even though people sometimes want to treat it that way. For example, the forecast for the weather says there's a 10% chance of rain. Well, that means 1 in 10. It doesn't mean it's not going to rain. And 1 times in 10, it's going to rain. But people tend to be quite put out when there's a 10% chance of rain and it does in fact rain. Similarly, I play a game called Empire Deluxe Enhanced Edition, which is a very old upgraded version of Empire Deluxe, which is an upgraded version of Empire, which is a DOS game. I mean, the Empire Deluxe runs on the latest versions of Windows, Empire Deluxe Enhanced. But it's a pretty simple game, and it has a lot of probabilities in the combat. The combat is always 1-to-1. Doesn't matter how many other units you have nearby, only one of your units can attack one of the opposing units, and the opposing units don't get help from anywhere else. So it's pretty straight probabilities, and you can go into the menus and get the battle calc and see what the probabilities are. Well, I tend to play against the AI, and the AI, or computer opponent as I prefer to say, is pretty bad. But if you think about it, uh, if you just fight straight up against the computer and it's a 50-50 battle, you're not going to do very well. In my position, I always start at great disadvantage in numbers so that I can give the computer in effect a chance, although it doesn't happen. And one of the best ways for me to improve my situation is to make sure that if an enemy bomber comes near me, this is World War II style combat, I send out a fighter to shoot it down. And the probabilities there are 2/3 the fighter wins, 1/3 the bomber wins. So Lou's playing this game and a bomber shows up, and I send out an airplane and it gets shot down. The airplane loses. And I always feel like somehow I've been gypped, even though 1/3 of the time that's what's supposed to happen. If I send out the fighter and it shoots the bomber down, I think to myself, that's the way it's supposed to happen. And the fighter then goes back to its base. But that's what I mean about probabilities. Probabilities are not certainties. So even though I've got a 2/3 chance, there are times when I send 2 fighters against the bomber and they both die. And that's only going to happen 1 time in 9, but it happens. It gets really annoying when 3 fighters go out against a bomber and they all die, because that's 1 chance in 27. And it can get worse. I've talked before about Superman units, where the enemy unit just keeps winning. And this is even though it gradually gets a little bit weaker because of how the game works, just keeps winning 50-50s and 1/3s and so forth. And I just get quite frustrated about it. Of course, sometimes my units are Superman units, but I don't usually allow them to do that because once one of my units has won a battle, I want it to go back to base or get out of the front lines and then rest to bring it back up to full strength. So I don't really see the Superman units on my side much unless I've sent something out and several enemy units attack it. Like I send a fighter out and 3 enemy fighters attack it and they all lose. My units become a Superman unit. This is all within the probabilities. It's not likely to happen, but sometimes it's going to happen. Well, it's like that in any game, of course, not just this particular video game, and certainly especially in tabletop war games where there are lots of dice rolls and so on. Funny, odd things are going to happen. You can't rely on the funny, odd things to happen, but occasionally they're going to happen. And of course, if you're desperate, you'll go for it and hope that the odd thing happens, the unusual thing. It probably won't. But then you've got to blame yourself, not blame the game. Yet many people do blame the game and do blame the dice, even though they've done things that are at poor odds. And the most likely occurrence is that they're going to fail. But that's something we could talk about at some length and not this time. So thanks for listening.